Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you, dear my students. Today, inshallah, we are going to complete our course Critical Thinking, and our lecture for today will be concerning the critical thinking skills. We are going to deal with the critical thinking measures skills, and I myself, Dr. Hamid Khairullah, with you. Don't hesitate to ask any questions through the chat, or even ask me through the email or the WhatsApp or Facebook group. Don't hesitate to ask any questions or to ask for any support. In the previous lecture, we dealt with a lot of things. We defined what's meant by the critical thinking. We dealt with the benefits of critical thinking to the learners, your service, because we usually use the critical thinking skills in everyday activity and everyday career. We dealt with the components of the critical thinking. We have 5 components of the critical thinking and the dimensions of the critical thinking. We have at least 3 dimensions of the critical thinking. The first one is the critical idea. The second is the critical person. The third, the critical thinking process. So we have the critical idea, the critical person, and the process itself. We dealt with the criteria of critical thinking, and these are the criteria upon which we judge or evaluate any critical idea. The first one, the clarity of the idea, the accuracy, the precision, the relevance, the depth, the breadth, and the logic. These are very important because they are the major criteria upon which or using which we usually judge or evaluate the critical point or the critical idea. So these are very important. Also, we dealt with the qualities of the critical thinker. Any critical thinker should have several qualities or several attributes. We dealt in detail with all of these qualities. Also, we compared the critical thinking to the non-critical thinking, the holistic one, for example. To be critical, you should be to the point, etc. And I think you still remember a lot of things and examples from the real life we used in the previous lecture. Don't hesitate to ask me for any muddy point or difficult things. Today, we'll deal with the critical thinking skills. The main topics are the defining thinking skills, classifying thinking skills into their major classes, what are the principles of developing thinking skills, what are the most important critical thinking skills, and what are the applications for critical thinking skills. Our objectives are to define thinking skills, classify thinking skills, to identify some important CT skills, and to apply the critical thinking skills in everyday life, in our career life, in every ways or phase of our life. First of all, we have some basic definition. The first is what's meant by thinking. I think we dealt with this definition before. Thinking means the act through which humans carry out the mental process or processing. So thinking is the function or the major or main function of our brain. So thinking is the mental processing of data, of information, of ideas, how to infer, how to judge, how to evaluate, how to analyze, how to memorize, etc. All of these are processes or minor processes from the mental processes of the brain or the mind. This process, thinking, leads to decision making and problem solving. So this is why we usually think. We think just to to make a decision, we think to solve a problem, we think to judge things or evaluate different situations, etc. So our thinking process should be oriented just to target something, to achieve a goal. This is very, very clear to you, no problem. So the mental skill, the thinking skill is the mental activity that one does to collect, store, retain about certain issue, whatever this issue is. And ETK, the thinking skill is used through analysis, organization, planning, and evaluation. And this is an everyday activity of our life. The major thinking skills are, for example, focusing, organizing ideas and things, analyzing, it means dividing things into smaller parts, compiling, how to collect and assemble things together, generating, how to create or generate new ideas, new items, connecting, how to connect the relevant or the intercorrelated things together. These some of the major mental or thinking skills we usually use during our life. So the critical thinking skill here is the skill of thinking which is used to verify a certain issue, to resolve a contradiction. So in case of the critical thinking, we usually have something called a contradiction. Something needs solving. This is called contradiction. So the skill of thinking which is used to verify a certain issue, to resolve such a contradiction, to reach a conclusion, to take a decision, to solve a problem, this thinking skill is called critical thinking skill. So there is difference between thinking skills as a whole. We have several different thinking skills, but here we are dealing with the critical thinking skills in particular. So the critical thinking skill in particular is used to do what? To resolve the contradiction between issues or situations, to reach a conclusion from given premises or propositions, and to take a decision or even to solve any problem. And the word problem here is used in its general meaning, not only confined to the very difficult problems, etc. And there are several CT skills. We have different critical thinking skills, and this is the subject of our lecture for today and the next lecture, inshallah. Okay, anyway, we have at least 10 critical thinking skills. The first one is how to distinguish between facts and opinion. You know, in our life we have facts, something which is established, something like the scientific facts or even everyday facts, something which is agreed upon by all the people or all the members of the society. And we have something else called opinion. The opinion is subjective, but the fact is objective. Subjective means it is personal, it is confined to one individual or a group of individuals. But the facts are embraced by all the people, all the society, all the members on the globe, even in case of the scientific facts, for example. So, to be able to distinguish and differentiate between the facts and the opinions, this is very important critical thinking skill. And this is the first one, by the way. The next one is to be able to distinguish and differentiate between what is relevant and what is irrelevant. Okay, what is relevant and irrelevant. Just to be, what are the relationships between X and Y? Is it relevant to this point? Is it relevant to this subject? It means it is included. Is it included in our domain here, in our subject or not? If it is called relevant. If it is not so, it is called irrelevant. The third one is to determine the credibility of the source. Suppose you are judging a situation or an issue, and you have a given source. We should ask here, what is the credibility of the source? Is it credible or incredible source? It is very important when we are thinking critically, and this is the third critical thinking skill. The next one is to be able to determine the accuracy of the story, the accuracy of the evidence, the accuracy of the claim. For example, nowadays we are suffering from a lot of things. Anyone share any piece of news, etc., without assuring about the accuracy or the credibility of the source, etc. So you have not only to determine the credibility of the source, but also to determine the accuracy of the story. Okay, this is very important. Skill number 5 is to be able to identify the allegations or the hidden evidence and backing. The allegations are, maybe premises or propositions or claims which may have evidence or may not. So you have to be able to identify the allegations or the hidden evidence and backing. Number 6, this is to be able to identify the unfamiliar or unclear hypotheses. We have different and several hypotheses in our life. So are they familiar? Are they clear or not? This is something related to the clarity of the hypothesis. It should be clear enough to be understood. Number 7, we have to avoid bias, prejudice, and stereotyping. And I think we've discussed this point in the previous lecture in detail. How to avoid bias, to be more and more objective, not to be subjective, not to use the stereotyping just to color some people or group of people, to color them with something, anything. Number 8, to identify the logical fallacies. And as you know, our everyday life is full of a lot of fallacies, and there is chapter dedicated for the logical fallacies and how to detect them and how can we refute them concerning the logical fallacies. Number 9, this is to be able to identify contradiction or illogical inferences. When you're going to interpret, when you're going to explain, when you're going to analyze and infer an information, a piece of information from data, from whatever, you have to be able to identify the contradiction. Is it matching to each other, or there is some kind of contradictory points or issue? This is very important, because some writers may write a piece of writing, then this piece of writing is full of a lot of contradiction. Some speakers, even the spokesman or even the public speakers, may speak a lot, but their speech may be full of a lot of contradiction. Are you able to identify and detect these contradictions or not? This is a very important critical thinking skill. Number 10, and this is the last one, by the way, to evaluate and judge the strength of the evidence. Someone provided you an evidence for an issue or for a topic, but what about the strength of this evidence? It is strong enough? Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it the weakest one? So this concerning the quantity, not only the quality. How much is it strong? This is very important. Not only to provide an evidence, but what about the strength of this evidence after confirming the accuracy and the credibility, etc. This is clear, I think. Okay, I think you are following me. No problem, dear students. So let's now go to something which is very important as introductory part to the critical thinking, to syllogism, etc. Something called argument, and argument in Arabic means قضية. قضية. An argument is a set of premises. Premises means مقدمات, which support some conclusion, and conclusion means نتيجة. So when someone is arguing with you, he usually provides some premises, just to give you some مقدمات, trying to convince or persuade you with the conclusion, which is المقدمة. So what about the validity and soundness of the premises, and what about the validity and soundness of the conclusion? This is very important part, so you have to pay attention to me now. So the argument, al-qadiyya, as an overall issue, consists of a set of premises, this group of muqaddimat, and a conclusion. And you usually use these premises to persuade the audience with the conclusion. But here, for the sake of our course, we'll be specifically concerned with the kind of argument called syllogism. Syllogism, this is repeated after me, syllogism. Syllogism means in Arabic al-qiyas al-mantiqi. This is syllogism. So syllogism is an argument. So this is an argument or a type of argument, no problem, consisting of three statements, two premises, and one conclusion. So syllogism consists of three statements or three propositions, two premises, and one conclusion. We will specifically be concerned with what is known as categorical syllogism. Categorical syllogism. This will be clear, inshallah, right now. What's meant by categorical syllogism? A syllogism that consists of three categorical proposition, and contains three distinct or specific terms, each of which appears in exactly two of the three propositions. Let's have this example to be able to understand this point. We say all mammals, for example, okay, all mammals have hair. This is called premise 1, المقدمة الأولى. All dogs are mammals. This is المقدمة الثانية. Each of them, including the third one, are called the propositions, no problem. So all mammals have hair. This is premise number 1, مقدمة أولى. All dogs are mammals. This is premise 2, مقدمة ثانية. So what is the conclusion here? We can conclude, we can infer that all dogs have hair. So this is the conclusion. This is النتيجة. So if all mammals have hair and all dogs are mammals, then therefore all dogs have hair. I focus here on the terminology first. The first one is called the premise 1. The second one is called the premise 2. And this one is the conclusion. مقدمة أولى, مقدمة ثانية, and نتيجة. And take care of the colors here, because we have something common. The word the mammals is common here and there in premise 1 and premise 2. The word dogs is common here in the premise number 2 and the conclusion. And the word have hair, this is common in premise 1 and premise, and in the conclusion. This is very important. This will be needed right now. So let's have this example again. The first premise, all mammals have hair. This one. This is the next one. All dogs are mammals. This is premise 2. and all dogs have heard is a conclusion. So, but what about this term, have her, here, have her, and have here, there? You notice that this term has al-hadd appeared, ظهر, in the first premise and in the conclusion. But take care here. Let's divide this sentence as an English sentence. We have something called the subject, al-mubtada, and the predicate, al-khabar. So we have something called subject, S, and the predicate, this is al-khabar. So we have here al-mubtada, subject, and here al-khabar, P, S and P. So the same for this conclusion. All dogs, this is the subject, al-mubtada, and have her, this is predicate or al-khabar. You notice that the predicate or al-khabar of the conclusion is called the major term. Again, the predicate of the conclusion is called the major term. Okay? Then, the subject of the conclusion is called the minor term. Okay? Then we have something else, which is the middle term. This is which is common in premise 1 and premise 2. So we noted that have her, this is the predicate or al-khabar of the conclusion. It is called the major term. The dogs or all dogs, this is the subject or al-mubtada of the conclusion. It is called the minor term. And we have the middle term which appears in premise 1 and premise 2. So in syllogism we have three terms: major term, minor term, and middle term. Okay? And note that the conclusion only contains two of the three terms. The red one, the dogs, which is the minor, and the blue, have her, which is the major. But one of the terms, which is green, the word mammals, is found only in the premises. This is very important. Then, what else? So, the major term, as we've stated right now, is the predicate of the conclusion. The minor term is the subject of the conclusion. And the middle term is the term that does not appear in the conclusion, but it appears twice, one in the first premise and two in the second premise. Then, what are the main components of the argument? We have here four components. Something called proposition. Proposition means a statement or claim or proposal. Something which is proposed, something which is a state, something which is claimed, but just a claim till now. So anything which is stated by someone or some group of people or even proposed can be called proposition. Then we have premises, al-muqaddimat. Premises are the propositions from which the conclusion is drawn. We usually draw the conclusion from the premises. So they are the basis of the argument. The conclusion, al-natija. This is a proposition, but it is backed or supported by the premises. And the argument as a whole consists of premises and conclusion. So it's very easy and simple. So the argument usually consists of the premises and the conclusion. The premises and conclusion together are called the propositions. But the premises support and back the conclusion, and the conclusion is derived or drawn from the premises. This is very clear. Let's now go to the logical propositions here. Each proposition has a quantity and quality. The adjective all, no, some determine the quantity of the proposition. Just to say, For example, all mammals, no mammals, so mammals, all human beings, no human being, some human beings, etc. So adjectives something like all, no, some, these determine the quantity of the proposition. But the quality, in fact, is determined by something else. This is determined by the affirmation and negation of the statement of the proposition, whether it is in the affirmative form في صيغة الإثبات or in the negative form في صيغة النفي. So the quality are determined by something like all, no, some, but the quality is determined by whether it is affirmative or negative. So we have 4 logical possibilities. What are they? Let's go here. We have the universal affirmation. Universal affirmation. We usually refer to it as A, capital A. In this proposition, all SRP, I mean all subjects are predicate. All subjects are predicate. Okay? Something like all dogs are mammals. All dogs are mammals. All SRP. This is called universal affirmation. Okay? This is called موجبة, because this affirmation كلية موجبة, universal affirmation, كلية موجبة, universal affirmation. Universal because we say all, affirmation because it is not negative. And this is called the A statements from the Latin word affirmio, and we take the first letter A here just to refer to this one, A, this one. This is called the universal affirmation. Universal affirmation. Something like all SRB. We have universal negation. Universal negation. This is referred to as E. E from the word nego. We take the letter E, nego. Something like no SRP. No SRP. This is universal, yes, because we use the no, but it is negative here because we use the no. Okay, so this is كلية سالبة. This is كلية موجبة. We have كلية سالبة, and this is the opposite of that one. Okay, or SRP here, no SRP. This is a negative one. We have also particular affirmation. This is موجبة كلية, sorry عفوا, جزئية موجبة. So particular affirmation. Particular means جزئية, affirmation means موجبة. Why we said affirmation موجبة here? Because this is some SRP. The statement is in the affirmative form, but it is particular, not universal. Why? Because we use the word some instead of all or instead of no. And this is referred to as I because of the word affirm. We take the letter I here. The last one is the particular negation, O. This from the word nego. We take O here to refer to a particular negation. This is جزئية سالبة. جزئية particular because we use the word some, and this negation because this is negative. We said not pay. Some S are not pay. So we have 4 types of the logical propositions: A, E, I, O, and this is very important. A, E, I, O. A means universal affirmation. E means universal negation. I means particular affirmation. O means particular negation. The examples are all S are P, no S are P, some S are P, some S are not P. So, here is common categorical syllogism. This is an example, for example. When we say all A are B, this is major premise. C is an A, this is minor premise. This is called the major premise because it includes the major term. And this is called minor premise because it includes or contains the minor term here. This is major term and minor term, and this is the middle one. Okay, I think you still remember. This is the major, this is the minor, and this is the middle term. So this is called the major premise, this is minor premise, and therefore C is B. Yes, C is B, because all A are B, C is an A, so therefore C is B. This is conclusion. This is the general form. But let's have an example. The classical example of this logical argument is all men are mortal. This is a major premise. Socrates is a man. Minor premise. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Simply, this is a very common classical example of the syllogism, which is all men are mortal means كل من عليها fan. Socrates, sorry, all men are mortal means كل الناس هيموتوا. Socrates is a man. سقراط رجل أو إنسان. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. هو كمان هيموت because he is one of the men. So this is a major premise, this is a minor premise, and this is a conclusion. This is very simple and classical example of the logical arguments. Dear my students, I would like to stop here, okay, to be able to understand this part of the lecture. Until we meet next time, inshallah. See you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.